Hello, Retroburn here. For those of you who are new, welcome to the channel. If you haven't seen my faction focus videos, one of them talks about what I think to be the cheapest, most beginner-friendly Warhammer 40,000 kill team.
Heretics will find no chinks in our armor, no spiritual flaw in our unfailing resolve, no quarter in our onslaught.
Primaris Marines are one of the toughest. A link to that video is going to appear in the upper right corner of this video right about now. Unfortunately, Games Workshop stopped producing the sets discussed in that video, and while those boxes are being sold on eBay and Amazon, one of these days those will run out. One concerned Kill Team community member mentioned this, and due to that, I've deemed it necessary to create this Death Guard Kill Team faction focus video to address the void made by those easy-to-build Primaris and easy-to-build reverse box sets. This video is split into the following parts. 1. This intro. 2. What box set you need for this kill team. 3. Other factions the Death Guard trumps. 4. Why it's beginner-friendly. 5. The Death Guard theme. 6. Death Guard tactics. 7. Suggested kill team lists. 8. Flail of Corruption discussion. 9. A discussion about the specialisms. 10. Suggested kill team lists. 11. Weaknesses. 12. How to expand your kill team. 13. Outro. A quick note, this how to play kill team guide about one of the more cost-effective Warhammer 40k kill teams was made in the early days of October 2020. A lot of things may have changed by then, depending on whether Games Workshop has implemented changes to the game and or this faction. The things discussed here may or may not be applicable or viable. This also does not discuss kill team commanders related Death Guard gameplay mechanics, units, and tactics. Also note that even if I'm focusing on a Plague Marine kill team here, the tactics and gameplay mechanics apply to the faction as a whole, making this my very first Death Guard faction focus video. And this is part 1 of 2.
Surrender yourself to the destroyer plague. Become death. Hear the laughter of the wrecking died will be your brothers. The cries of the loyalists come.
So what do you need? A box of Plague Marines. Done. Now you might bellow, are you crazy? It's $50! For reasons I will discuss extensively in this video, I stand by this decision to deem this faction as my second choice for the cheapest, most beginner-friendly kill team option. It may not be the cheap kill team one usually envisions, certainly $50 is not something to be taken lightly, but if you want a cost-effective squad that won't reduce you to a gurgling mass of conniptions just thinking about all the combos and gameplay features you have to keep in mind and capitalize on every chance you get, this is the box for you. Now, in terms of simplicity and cost, I still stand by my first video. Easy to build Primaris and easy to build reverse box sets. Together, those do make for the cheapest, most beginner-friendly kill team you can ever have. And at $15 each when Games Workshop sold them, they were definitely rock-bottom affairs in terms of price. I've made an extensive faction-focused video about Primaris Intercessors and Reavers. Watch that video and subscribe to my channel for more. I'll be uploading more guides in the weeks and months ahead. However, yeah, they're going and going fast. Now, one can argue that there are other factions that let you have a complete kill team for under $50. So let me see, Harlequins? They are actually good, but I feel that they're just one-trick locomotives that become train wrecks if they can't get into melee range. You're stuck with short-range weapons too. I feel they don't make for a good training set for beginners. I'd rather a squad teaches a newbie a variety of things like melee, and long, mid, and short-range shooting. The Death Watch is actually quite good too, but two things have prevented me from recommending this faction over the Death Guard. One is they've an extra gameplay mechanic that may muddle things up for some beginners, and 2, they're not as durable as Plague Marines. Sure, with the bits in that set, 2 of them can have a 3+ invulnerable save, but that's just 2 units. In contrast, all Death Guard units in Kill Team have an extra layer of protection in the form of the trait Disgustingly Resilient. I'll explain this perk later on in this video. The Adeptus Custodes is a strong choice, but I feel they're too much of a fire and forget force, such is their durability. Now, don't get me wrong, A Fire and Forget Force is good for Kill Team beginners, but I feel that the Custodes is too durable for it to be a good faction for Greenhorns. Also, there will be scenarios where they will be frustrating to play for newbies due to their extremely low model count. The Sisters of Silent Squad set strikes a good balance between range and melee. It's another one of those no-frills simplistic squad with only a modicum of kill team tactics. There's good weapon diversity in that one. However, they are fragile, and at $80, the set is expensive. The Orc Boys are too fragile, and I feel the Flash Gits box needs Ammo Runts and Gretchen to be even more effective. It's also more expensive than the Plague Marine set. So now we are left with this, a $50 box set of Grandfather Nurgle's Chosen, former Titanic defenders of humanity who, in the end, prostrated themselves to the mercies of chaos and became the god of contamination's heralds in real space. And they're not bad. This option is more expensive, yes, but bad? Nay, far from it. The box contains a plethora of weapons ranging from the standard bolt gun and bolt pistol to the more lethal special weapons like the plasma and meltaguns. If you're new to Warhammer 40,000, you'd also be awed by the array of the more esoteric instruments of death and destruction like the Flail of Corruption and the Plague Spewer.
The frozen of death and life, he holds swirling from the slits of the grand battle, and that be denied.
1. Durability. But what made me pick this faction as my choice for a beginner-friendly kill team is its durability. As mentioned in my first cheapest kill team guide, a killing blow has to go through 4 sub-phases in the game before it ever becomes one. This is the hit roll, wound roll, save roll, and injury roll sub-phases, or sections if that's the way you want to call them. The Death Guard, however, has this extra stratum of protection for them. They've this trait called Disgustingly Resilient that kicks in if ever they lose a wound. This extra layer imposes itself between the save roll and injury roll subphases. Every time one of your cadres of contamination fails its save roll, it stands to lose a wound. The trait Disgustingly Resilient procs. You get to roll a die, and on a 5-up, that model gets to ignore that wound. They're a brick wall, a mucus-festooned and pustule-encrusted one. And did I mention they're Toughness 5 Marines? They are. And aside from one other faction, they are the toughest in the entire game. Toughness 5 means Strength 4 and Strength 3 weapons only have a 33.33% chance to penetrate. Plague Marines may only have 1 wound apiece, but this low probability coupled with a Disgustingly Resilient trait makes the Death Guard very tough nuts to crack indeed. This in turn makes them one of the better factions for beginners, as this stupendous staying power lets players focus more on familiarizing themselves with the nuances of kill team rules. 2. No frills approach. The Death Guard are also one of the simplistic factions in Kill Team, with no bells and whistles other factions have. I've mentioned some of these in my previous Reavers and Intercessors faction-focused video. The Astra Militarum has the voice of command mechanic, the Adeptus Mechanicus has the canticles of the Omnissiah, the Death Watch has mission tactics and special issue ammunition, and the Drukhari have the combat drugs and power from pain gameplay mechanics. In contrast, the Death Guard do not have faction-wide features that you need to keep track of. Moreover, Plague Marines only have 3 abilities: Death to the False Emperor, which gives you an extra attack on hit rolls of 6+, the aforementioned Disgustingly Resilient perk, and Transhuman Physiology, which we will discuss in the next section.
We are the cosmic miasma that diffuses into a million worlds. We seep into the blood and carcass of the Imperium and battles for the frail cadaver you call an emperor.
The Death Guard, like in Big 40k, are all about grinding implacably forward and shrugging off enemy fire, and the addition of the injury roll phase in Kill Team bolsters that theme even further. Due to this additional phase, even if a blow or shot somehow barrels through everything including your disgustingly resilient roll, an unscathed Plague Marine caught out in the open still has a 50% chance of shrugging off enemy fire. And even if they do suffer a flesh wound, these guys are still the augmented superhumans the God Emperor of humanity has created. They still share the transhuman physiology trait with their loyalist brethren, allowing them to ignore their first flesh wound. Adding insult to injury to their enemies, they've this Death Guard tactic called Inured to Pain that lets a Plague Marine ignore all flesh wounds penalties to their hit rolls for the remainder of the battle. Got injured a second time by Bolter and Blade? Spend 2 command points and poof! That Marine's aim will forever be as straight as Nurgle's malignant vectors. If you're playing with the rules found in the Kill Team Elites expansion, and I highly recommend that you should as the book introduces abilities and units that make the game more balanced, and the factions fluffier, the Death Guard have this faction perk called Inexorable Advance. This perk solidifies the faction's image as a grinding machine that marches unyieldingly forward. With it, Nurgle's children can fire in rapid fire mode at 18 inches and suffer no penalties when firing heavy or assault weapons, even if they've made a normal move or an advanced move respectively. This compensates for their watch grass grow slow 5-inch move. The Death Guard may be slow, but they've quite the arsenal of special weapons. Quite a number of Adeptus Astartes weaponry is accessible to the Heralds of the God of Disease. The trusty bolt gun, the plasma pistol, and the dreaded Melta and plasma guns are options you can take. And while you can only take 2 special weapons marines and 2 fighters who can wield the heavier melee weapons, the Inexorable Advance perk ensures that you're hurling rapid fire shots at 18 inches and that you're unfettered by movement considerations. And once your fighters have closed the gap, be prepared to witness sprays of pus, blood, and viscera as you get to work your melee weapons. And what weapons these are! Of the 7 melee weapons that the Plague Marines have, only 1 isn't a plague weapon. All the rest let you reroll wound rolls of 1, with 1 blade the Plague Champion's Plague Sword letting you reroll all failed wound rolls. And the one that doesn't have that ability? It's the Power Fist. The Power Fist. You know that one, times 2 strength, minus 3 AP, D3 damage? Yes, that one. It may have a -1 to hit penalty as it's unwieldy, but when your champion swings twice and even just one of those attacks hit, all that's left is going to be jagged, blood-soaked wreaths of organic matter. And this nightmare doesn't end there. The Death Guard's array of kill team tactics focus on withstanding attacks, cracking open enemy armor, and just being downright repugnant. They have things like letting loose a stream of tentacles to seize adversaries, erupting in a shower of flesh-melting gore, and even unleashing minor demons on a hapless foe. In the next section, we will discuss these stratagems.
Our gifts will let life from battlefields burn with caution.
The first can be used even before the match starts, just before the initiative phase specifically. For 2 command points, 1 Plague Marine can be commanded to invoke the attention of Nurgle. On a roll of 1, it is deemed unworthy and suffers D3 mortal wounds. It's a very low probability, but if ever you do roll a 1, remember that a mortal wound is still a wound, so it procs your disgustingly resilient trait. Any other result imbues that Plague Marine with a +1 bonus on its hit and wound rolls for the rest of the battle. It's pretty potent, and in case something goes wrong, your faction has an innate protective layer that gives you a chance to nullify mortal wounds. In the lore, the Death Guard are a very devout lot, their religious fervor and belief in symbols largely unmatched by other heretic Astartes factions. The Grandfather's Blessing tactic fits this theme as well as a couple of other tactics, including the 3-eyed fly in the Grandfather's Tally stratagems. The former bolsters your Plague Marine's durability by giving a +1 bonus to disgustingly resilient rolls for units that are within 3 inches of held objectives. True to their belief in symbols, the tactic requires that you hold 3 objectives. The latter, Grandfather's Tally lets you reroll all failed wound rolls for your squad for a full battle round. It requires, though, that exactly 7 units have been felled. Other Plague Marine tactics, as mentioned, focus on resisting enemy attacks, rending enemy armor, and being the revolting living vectors of contagions concocted by Grandfather Nurgle. These are: the Death Guard have always been depicted as an unrelenting host heralded by a wave of buzzing warp spawn flies. For 2 command points, you can use these diminutive vermin to conceal one of your backline from enemy snipers. So long as the recipient is not the closest target, a model obscured by cloud of these Nurgle spawn cannot be targeted. Use this to protect one of your special weapon soldiers. Among the Plague Marines, there is none so hated than their former brothers in arms. This tactic grants one Plague Marine a +1 bonus to its wound rolls when it attacks Imperium models in the shooting or fight phase. Put this on one of your units that has an AP weapon to maximize your chances of slaying those worshippers of the Carrion King of Mankind. The primary weakness the Death Guard has is their deplorable movement statistic. At 5 inches, some of the faster factions can run circles around them. To mitigate this, they have a tactic called Death March. For 1 command point, you can add 2 inches to their movement for the entirety of 1 movement phase. Very useful in the early game, but do take note that if you're planning to use this in the first turn, you won't have enough command points to use Grandfather's Blessing to buff one of your Plague Marines. You also can't charge, advance, nor fall back in the movement phase this tactic was used. Once you've bludgeoned into your enemy's lines, though, your units have a plethora of Death Guard stratagems to maintain your murderous momentum. Grasping Tentacles is one. Once you're able to get into melee range, enemies will find it difficult to extricate themselves from your slobbery grip as thick tendrils of mucus-slathered viscera erupt from one of your marines and ensnare one of its adversaries. Costs 1 command point and requires the Plague Marine to be within 1 inch of 1 or more enemy models. And if you think being in close proximity to your Plague Marines is a perilous situation, Death Guard champions can summon Nurglings to attack one target that's in melee range. For 1 command point, you pick a target, and on a roll of 4+, that hapless unit suffers 1 mortal wound. And if somehow your enemy injures your Plague Marines or outright causes one to lose a wound, the tactics Inured to Pain and Putrid Splatter ensure your opponent will still be hurting even as he manages to wreak havoc on your Marine's pustule-covered anatomy. As mentioned earlier, this tactic lets a Plague Marine ignore all flesh wound penalties to their hit rolls for the remainder of the battle. At a cost of 2 command points, this is quite expensive and only has a 16.67% chance of success per enemy. However, you get to roll for each enemy within 1 inch of the chosen Death Guard unit. On a 6, an enemy model suffers 1 mortal wound as splatters of effluvium disgorged from the Marine's carcass begin to eat its way through armor, flesh, and innards. Due to the low probability of slaying an enemy, I'd recommend that you use this only when your unit is practically buried in bodies. 4 or a greater number of enemy troops ganging up on your Plague Marine makes for a perfect scenario for this tactic. Using this on just 3 enemies is already high-risk, high-reward play. There are other Death Guard tactics that affect only non-Plague Marine units. These are the following. Affects only Terminator units. Lets you call in Terminators from reserve and drop them anywhere on the board so long as they're 5 inches away from enemy units. When a Poxwalker suffers a flesh wound, you can spend 1 command point on this tactic, and it won't have to take nerve tests for the remainder of the battle. Gives you a 50% chance of resurrecting an enemy unit a Poxwalker has killed. It comes back to unholy life as another Nurgle zombie under your command. Nifty! And finally, before we close this section, a reminder about the tactic Grandfather's Blessing. Do note that the condition for death to the False Emperor to proc is written as each time you make a hit roll of 6+. The word unmodified isn't there, and the word plus is the clincher. Tactics and buffs that let you add 1 to the hit roll directly affect your odds of activating death to the False Emperor. If a Plague Marine has a +1 to hit because he has the Grandfather's Blessing buff, hit rolls of 5 and 6 will proc Death to the False Emperor. A Marine with a Great Plague Cleaver, which has an inherent -1 to hit rolls due to it being very unwieldy, can now stand to get an extra attack with the said ability, as now, rolls of 6 will still be a 6. The -1 because of the weapon's handicap bringing it down to 5, but Grandfather's Blessing bringing it back up to 6. For maximum carnage, though, it's better to bestow the Grandfather's Blessing tactic to a Flail of Corruption toting Marine. An extra attack means another batch of D3 hit rolls. So, what can you do with a box of Plague Marines?
Virtue and blood, strength and zeal, plague and pestilence, blight and wrath.
With the Plague Marines box set, you'd be able to make no less than the 3 necessary squad variations for you to meet what I deem to be the usual threats. Marines or Marine equivalents, shooty GEQs, guard equivalents, and melee-oriented GEQs. To those who are 100% new to Warhammer 40k, Marine equivalents, henceforth known as MEQs, are those units with stats similar to Space Marines, i.e., Toughness 4, Save 3+. GEQs, on the other hand, are those units with stats similar to Imperial Guardsmen, i.e., Toughness 3, Save 4 to 5+. Since Kill Team has this roster system that allows you to swap units into and out of a 20-man list, all the models that you can make from the Plague Marines box fit inside that 20-unit limit, making all the list variations here legal if ever you decide to enter an event. Take note though that 1. Against fully fleshed out Kill Team rosters that are optimized for competitive play, you'd be hard-pressed to win with just this one-box squad. Remember, as implied in this video's title, this guide is only about introducing beginners to the Death Guard faction. If you want to optimize your squad, I'd advise you to check out part 2 of this Death Guard faction focus series. In it, I'll be outlining what I deem to be more competitive Kill Team Death Guard lists. 2. In order to cut down costs, you might want to magnetize the arms and shoulder joints of your models. This way, you can swap loadouts in and out as needed. Check out my Warhammer 40k Magnetizing a Plague Marine Champion Death Guard guide video, the link to which should be appearing in the upper right corner of this video right about now. Now, for the Death Guard Kill Team lists. Against MEQ teams, this is what I would be fielding. Now, 6 is a number I'm not comfortable with, as this brings this list down to similarly sized Adeptus Astartes squads, which can carry more specialized weaponry. With only one box though, our options are limited. Still, versus fellow beginners, this list should be a good kill team. It can hold out on its own, and then some. All of the special weapons in this list have a strength rating greater than 4, ensuring you'll always wound on rolls of 3+. What with the Death Guard Tactics veterans of the Long War, Grandfather's Blessing, and Grandfather's Tally, you should have no trouble wounding enemies. And with all of them being AP weapons, enemies should have a tough time saving. Just remember to, as much as possible, save a command point for injury roll rerolls. Remember that each time you attack with a Flail of Corruption, you get to roll D3 hit rolls. Since you've made our flail-wielding Marine a combat specialist, you get to roll 3 D3 hit rolls each time he gets activated. In conjunction with the Death to the False Emperor perk, mentioned in the Why It's Beginner Friendly section, having him buffed with Grandfather's Blessing gives him the ability to get an extra D3 hit rolls each time he rolls a 5+, not 6. So let's break that down. Combat Specialism. That's +1 attack due to the Expert Fighter passive ability. So now your Plague Marine fighter has 3 attacks. Each time one attacks with a Flail of Corruption, one gets to make a d3 dice roll to determine the number of hit rolls you should be making. So that's 3 attacks times 1d3 hit rolls per attack. That's d3 hit rolls. Let's assume you roll a 3 for each of those. That's a total of 3 times 3 hit rolls. That's a total of 9 hit rolls. Now, assuming he has been buffed by Grandfather's Blessing, he gets to proc Death to the False Emperor on rolls of 5+. Rolls of 5 and 6 give one 2/6 odds. That's a 33.33% chance. So theoretically, out of the 9 hit rolls, 33.33% of those should be rolls of 5 and or 6. 9 times 0.3333 is 3. So 3 of your rolls should be 5s and or 6, activating Death to the False Emperor and giving you 3 more attacks. That's a total of 9 plus another 3d3 hit rolls. Let's assume you get unlucky and get only 1s on each of those additional hit rolls. That's still a total of 9 plus 3, that's 12 hit rolls. Now, Plague Marines have a weapon skill of 3+. That's a 66.67% chance of landing a blow. So theoretically, 8 should land. A Flail of Corruption in the hands of a Plague Marine is a Strength 6 weapon, and it's going up against a Space Marine's Toughness 4 rating. So you get to wound on rolls of 3+. But remember, in this example, we've the Grandfather's Blessing. Since the Blessing gives you a +1 to wound bonus, rolls of 2 give you 3, so you get to wound on 2+. This is an 83.33% chance. Rounding up, 7 should wound. The Flail of Corruption has an AP rating of -2. A Marine save stat is 3+. He has to roll 5 ups to save. Again, rolls of 5 and 6 give one 2/6 odds. That's a 33.33% chance. 7 times 0.3333 is 2. 5 should go through. Now, this is all theory crafting and math hammering, but my point is, the Flail of Corruption is a beast. 3 things though. 1. It makes the Marine wielding it a priority target for your opponent. Your adversary will do everything he or she can to ensure you don't get into melee range with that juggernaut. 2. Note that, as per the ability's description, the bonus rolls do not proc Death to the False Emperor again. 3. The Flail of Corruption has been reduced to 1 damage in the August 2019 errata that's currently up on warhammercommunity.com. About the other weapons, I've decided to make the Marine holding the plasma gun be the heavy specialist and the Blight Launcher toting Marine to be the demolitions guy. Why these choices? With the Plague Marines being hardy units, on this list, I feel we don't need the veteran's passive ability and the weapons range stats don't require us to use a free move. As the plasma gun is the more reliable weapon between the two, having a flat 2 damage rating whenever it's overcharged, having an extra shot is crucial, especially in a game that pits 2 low model count squads against each other. The heavy specialism's active ability, the More Bullets tactic, answers this need, and while its passive is rendered useless by the Death Guard's inexorable advanced faction perk, another crackling ball of superheated gas in your enemy's gun line is well worth the specialism's inclusion into the list. Just remember to reserve a command point for the overcharge just in case. This leaves the demolition specialism for the Blight Launcher, another of the exceptional weapons in Kill Team. What hurts it for me though, compared to the plasma gun, is its random damage value. With a damage rating of D3, you rolling a 1 is a very real possibility, and if you're up against Primaris units, there's a good chance your target will survive your opening volleys in turn 1. Still, with Strength 6, you're wounding on 3s against MEQs, 2s if your target is obscured. If your target is out in the open, you can opt to use custom ammo, which adds a +1 to your wound rolls without the against targets that are obscured clause. Remember the other tactics that net you bonuses for wound rolls, though? A lot of players forget them. Going back to the topic of the heavy specialism, in cases where you're up against a squad that has a 3 wound model, you might want to make the Blight Launcher Marine as your heavy, since the plasma gun's flat 2 damage all but guarantees that you need 2 shots to kill the target. At least with the Blight Launcher, there's a chance that out of the 2 shots, you might land a 3 wound Blight round. Now, you might remark that, so why didn't you make the Blight Launcher dude as your heavy in the first place? Well, against squads that have toughness 2 units, the chance of you rolling all ones for the Blight Launcher's damage is still a very real possibility. If you're targeting 2 primaries that are within 2 inches of each other and that happens, you only get to roll an injury roll for one of them at the best. Flat 2 damage shots with a plasma gun ups your chances of bagging both. With 3 wound enemies, you need more of the all or nothing Blight Launcher shots to raise your chances of getting a kill. Your leader should be kept in the back line grabbing objectives as is your command point battery. Know though that you're often outnumbered, so in some scenarios, you've no choice but to get him out there to help the rest of your squad. Armed with a Plague Sword and a Plasma Pistol, he's no slouch in close or even mid-range combat. You can up his chances of surviving with a tactical reroll, decisive strike, and decisive shot tactics. If you've a surplus of command points, the Nurgling Infestation and the 3-eyed Fly tactics can be useful in a pinch too. The latter is very situational and expensive, but does provide a 50% chance to shrug off wounds, making it a worthwhile investment. The other 2 Marines might not have potent weaponry, but they can be used to give cover to your more important soldiers, blocking line of sight. You can also use them to charge your enemy's gun line. Overwatch is tough to pull off, and with this faction's disgustingly resilient trait, killing chargers becomes even tougher. You can then pile in with your Flail of Corruption wielding Marine once the target becomes mired in melee combat. For 125-point matches, I'd add a Great Plague Cleaver Marine. Because it has this inherent -1 to hit penalty, I'd make him a combat specialist and bump down the Flail of Corruption soldier to being a non-specialist. I'd then swap out the Plague Marine champion's plasma pistol with a plasma gun. This is why magnetizing your models is very important. Watch my Warhammer 40k magnetizing a Plague Marine champion Death Guard guide video if you haven't. And because we'd still be short in points, I'd put an Icon of Despair to one of the ordinary Plague Marines. Not really important in a matchup against MEQs, which usually have high leadership stats, but hey, who knows? This brings our points to 123. It would look like this. Against GEQs, this would be the squad I'll take. If a large portion of his or her kill team is comprised of melee units, replace the launcher with a Plague Spewer. This will bring up the squad to 100 points. Make the Spewer Marine a veteran. With the Plague Spewer's limited range and it being a heavy weapon, what's more important is bringing the weapon in range faster. Access to a free move before the first battle round even begins is huge. You also don't need the extra shot with it as you're up against model that has deplorable saves. However, the heavy specialism is still a viable option, especially if you feel you need those 2 command points for rerolls, Grandfather's Blessing, or other shenanigans. For 125-point matchups, I'd bring in not a Great Plague Cleaver, but another ordinary Marine with an Icon of Despair. GEQs usually have so-so leadership stats, And with their fragile nature, bodies should begin piling up even in the early game. Having an Icon of Despair can potentially lock up a handful of enemy units as it has a 6-inch aura. And because we have the points for them, I'd get the champion with a Power Fist and a Plasma Gun. It's overkill, but we don't have anything else to spend the extra points on. A Great Plague Cleaver isn't needed in this matchup as GQs go down easy. If they've hardier units, you have the Plague Champion, the Flail of Corruption, and the Plague Belcher for those. Against a 125 point melee GEQ kill team, I'd be bringing in a Plague Spear again. I won't make him a veteran though, as the enemy will be charging at me, and the command point I would have spent on adaptive tactics would be better reserved for something else. The Icon of Despair, needless to say, would still be invaluable here. The champion would have the same loadout. The list would look like this.
Day 3. This sickness is peculiar. It is unmistakable now. Her eyes are growing closer together, as if they're trying to merge.
So far, all we've talked about are the faction's strengths. They are not without weaknesses, however, and foremost of these is their low model count. Points-wise, Plague Marines are expensive. They're 14 points each, and their fighters and gunners are 15 apiece. To top it all off, a good number of their more impressive weaponry costs 3 to 4 points, meaning you're bringing to the table units that cost 14 to 19 points. From what you've seen in our discussion at 100 points, all you'll be able to take from a single Plague Marine box is 6 soldiers, 7 if you're playing at the 125 point level. Now, even if you're one of the toughest factions in Kill Team, and there will be matches where your Marines seem unkillable, dice are dice. There will be matches that things don't go your way. If you lose even 3 Marines, things will begin to unravel for your squad. As mentioned, they are also very slow. In matches where it's very objectives based, the objectives are scattered across the board, and you don't get points for killing enemies, you're going to have a hard time. This faction, though, as mentioned, have a lot of things that mitigate these shortcomings. Tactics that increase survivability, let you move first, and ones that increase your chances of killing something. All these you have to capitalize on to make the Death Guard weather whatever punishment the enemy dishes out. Now that you've got the basics, you might ask, where to from here? You need bodies. Just 2 to 3 more would be good. For these, there's no other choice but Poxwalkers. The easy to build Death Guard Poxwalker box is just $15 and you get 6 of them. You can sell the other 3 if you want. They'd be useful for tying up enemies, contesting objectives, and providing cover for your more valuable units. If you want a beefier option, you can get a Blightlord Terminator. I recommend you get only one, as having 2 would severely cut down your squad size, as those things are expensive. A popular choice is the flail-wielding Termi. People teleport strike the model in the enemy's backline. Horrifying stuff. One with a Reaper autocannon isn't bad too. A heavy 4, strength 7, AP-1, damage 1 weapon can rip holes into GEQ and MEQ units alike. You can make it into a demolition specialist so you can wound MEQs and rolls of 2+.
Slow, unyielding, spitting out volleys of fire from conventional and Empyrean weapons alike. Plasma guns vomit bolts of superheated gases akin to that of Imperium weaponry, while more esoteric, alluvium-encrusted plate weapons disgorge turbid torrents of suppuration riding with insidious, warp-spawn disease. These are the Death Guard. Against their foul contagions and plate-infused weapons, the Emperor cannot protect.
And this has been Retroburn, and if you like this Death Guard faction-focused video, please like, share, comment, and or subscribe. Doing all four would be awesome. Happy gaming!